Huh? Huh?
But at least now it can't get much worse.
What the hell? Oh my god!
Nigga, what the f?
This is the second video about Neverwinter Nights. In the first one I talked about the main campaign. You can check it out for context. This time I'm going to discuss the expansions. There are 3 of them: Mask of the Betrayer, Storm of Zehir, and Mysteries of Westgate. Each one of them will take about 15 hours to complete. Right from the start I want to say that all of them are great. Some are better, some are worse, but they all completely worth your time. I will talk about them in chronological order of their releases, starting with Mask of the Betrayer. According to the developer, Obsidian Entertainment, work on this campaign started even before the release of the main part of the game. The main idea or credo behind this expansion can be described as total improvement. The lead designer of the studio at the time, Kevin Saunders, said the following: "Throughout the course of the project, we fixed many bugs, optimized performance, made better use of the graphics technology, and in general tied up loose ends." Mask of the Betrayer leaves a quite positive impression because the developers cared about their fans and created this campaign for them. For example, Obsidian added 2 more elves and a completely new race, Genasi. These were frequently requested by players. Besides this, they optimized the engine and introduced a couple of visual tricks. One of them is a special black and white color scheme and filter when we enter a shadow realm. In terms of both the story and graphical representation, it looks great. Also, now relationships are deeper and more meaningful. A better attitude towards the player provides bonuses in battles, and if companions don't like you, they can leave the party. In the main campaign, it was all about the numbers. Now it looks more like some sort of modern role-playing system like in Dragon Age. We got a few new classes, prestige included, a bunch of spells, monsters, animations, and on top of that, a significant portion of dev's time was spent on new tools for modders and creators of fan-made adventures. Long story short, Mask of the Betrayer brings new content, made quality of life improvements, and overall gives the game longevity. All these changes relate to the technical side of Neverwinter Nights, but let's get to business. What's the story and how do we play it? Just the same way as the original, Mask of the Betrayer is a linear story-oriented adventure and the direct continuation of the main plot. This connection is barely noticeable though. All we got is a few dialogue lines about our past, we will meet 2 of our previous companions, and we will find out the reason why we appeared in Rushman, region where expansion takes place. The connection between campaigns is not that good. Still, it has its logic, does not ruin the lore, and somewhat creates nostalgic moments. In terms of scale, Mask of the Betrayer is way smaller than the main campaign. We have only a few dozen locations and dungeons. On the other hand, this allowed to create levels filled with content. There are almost no brainless walks around due to better level design. Now we have an interesting portal concept of the travel between the real world and the shadow one, but still there are a lot of loads when you pass interiors and dungeons. Unfortunately, they are part of the game. The number of quests that we got in one expansion I've probably haven't seen in a whole main campaign. There are a ton of secondary tasks and events that are non-obligatory. Most of them work on the atmosphere of the game or at least try to create interesting gameplay-wise situations. Of course, there are some find-bring types of quests, but I can say there are a significant amount of them. This expansion would rather give us a tricky puzzle like finding the right direction of the light beam or a logic riddle. There are plenty of things to do. Story is the best element here after all. In my opinion, the most effort was put into writing. I've seen a lot of comments which stated that story arguably one of the best among all RPGs. To some extent I agree with such a statement, because in most cases similar games create amazing characters, dialogues and world, but story often being extremely generic and blurry. Mask of the Betrayer does exactly the opposite. It gives an incredible detective story which surely will affect you in ways that will take some time to recover. But let's forget about it for now. I want to talk talk about it a bit later. As I've mentioned at the beginning, this expansion brought some graphical improvements, new visual effects and monsters, we've got new environments, and we got completely unique companions. Mighty Bear Spirit Okku, Divine Creature Kaelin, Hexponga Nayev. They have a distinct appearance, which makes them so memorable. This is besides their great story designs. As for the environment, I haven't noticed any copy-paste from the original campaign. They look completely new. Fresh. They've been made from scratch. Even if I've seen old textures and models from time to time, I couldn't remember where I've seen them exactly. As the final touch, we can travel between the real world and Shadow Realm, which shown as a special black and white color that already tells us here is life and there is death. A cool feature, that distinct atmosphere and mood of the levels, and I've seen similar idea at least once in another game, Saboteur. Despite my praise among all other campaigns, I like this one the least. Why? It is incredibly tedious. Expansion oriented for high-end characters. Even if you create a new one, the game will give you 18 levels from the start. In order to progress, you really should know well D&D rules, know all types of damage, spells, counter spells, all possible combos between the classes and Neverwinter as a whole. Mask of the Betrayer is famous for its high difficulty. And the funniest part is how the developers lost the balance. At the start it's incredibly oblivious, but closer to the middle of the campaign it is a piece of cake. Players unironically use cheats to get through the hellish start. I'm no exception. Long time ago I've already played this expansion, so I've picked Paladin. That in theory should have been great here. After an hour or so I stuck and couldn't progress, so with the help of a console I've made my hero into the pure fighter, but still suffered and save loaded for a dozen of times before I could play normally. On top of that, there is a new mechanic, spiritual hunger. Later I will tell the story explanation, but for now let's focus on the gameplay. We can absorb spirits and manipulate their energy if needed. On the left side of the screen will appear a special indicator panel, which shows the current level of our hunger. The bigger your starvation, the worse its influence. Negative bonuses to attributes, vulnerability to damage, and so on. You can't ignore this mechanic. To tire your hunger, you can either feed on spirits, which is an evil deed, or try to control it. You will be given active skills for this. Obviously, it is harder to play as a good character, because suppressing gives you less energy. This concept is great. It gives at least two choices story-wise, but I personally don't like these synthetic limitations. Create a world with certain rules, so I would be free within it. I am not a big fan of mechanics that somewhat takes my freedom. But once again, spiritual hunger is a great idea. It gives new possibilities and motivation to move on. It's just the way I don't like it. Now I want to talk about the story. I'll recall it for those who won't be playing, but if you do, go here, where I'll get to conclusion without spoilers. Let's go. We wake up in some unknown cave where we are met by a sorceress in a red robe, Sophia. We do not remember how we got here. What happened after our fight with King of Shadows, just noticed that the silver sword shard in our chest is missing. In a few minutes, suddenly inside of us we feel hunger, which will absorb the spirit of a wolf. In the following hours we are going to investigate what is a spirit eater and how do we deal with it. The pacing and the storytelling are phenomenal. You really feel like this is some sort of detective plot. We get all the answers nearly at the very end, mostly if you will pay attention and complete a few secret quests. The deal is that long time ago there was a god of death, Merkel. He created the Wall of the Faithless. In his opinion, atheism towards gods is the worst possible sin. Later I will explain why. So any creature, regardless of whenever they are good or evil, after physical death, get here and start dissolving into the wall. At certain story point appeared Akachi. He became the high priest of Merkel. After some time happened two important twists. Due to accident died lover of Akachi, a woman called the Founder. She was faithless, so obviously her soul went straight to the wall. Akachi didn't want to let her go, so he found the silver sword and started a crusade against the wall. Publicly he wanted to destroy the source of injustice. In reality he wanted to release his lover. Eventually Akachi freed her, however he himself was defeated. Merkel created a special punishment. Priest was placed in the wall and started to dissolve. Just before he disappeared completely, the death god released remains of his spirit. He became what? That's right, the spirit eater. This thing, the hunger that sits inside of us, that's the remains of Akachi in form of a curse. But why is an add-on called the Mask of the Betrayer? Merkel called his priest for his treason, and masks are called the carriers of the curse. The hunger feeds not only with spirits, but his hosts too. There were a lot of masks, some treated Akachi as a gift, others as a curse. Most of the creatures that do know about it think that you can't cure it. Still, we should find a way, right? In the end, Merkel was killed, so Kelemvor became the new god of death. He made a few changes in the afterlife, but decided to leave the wall intact, because you can't change universe order in a click. One of the Doom Guides wasn't quite happy about it. She decided to organize another crusade to the wall, which is also failed. We wander around gathering this information before we finally meet Merkel, what's left of it.
Look at the top of his head!
He tells us that you can't kill a god that easily. He will exist as long as he is feared, as long as he is remembered, and as long as people suffer in his name. It turns out that primary goal of the hunger curse was not punishment, but to prevent it from allowing the god of death to disappear. Quite a pity and hypocritical creature. This campaign raises many interesting questions and lyrical digressions. By the way, he will explain why we can control this hunger better than others. Because we also had the silver sword, and all of its owners are forever linked.
Interlinked.
The most interesting thing is that this damned god can also be consumed and destroyed, or you can leave him as he is. It all depends on you. After this, of course, we will rise the third crusade against the wall and move towards the climax of this story. There are 3 possible endings. If you have collected all the parts of the mask, you can restore the essence of Akachi and completely lift the curse. Then return peacefully to Crossroad Keep, where we will reunite with Kelgar from the original campaign. Or you can simply destroy the essence of Akachi within yourself, which will free us from hunger, but the curse will continue to exist. Or you can consume it and fully control your hunger. Later, Kelemvor will say that in this way we will become a threat even to the gods. Those are good, neutral and evil endings accordingly. I liked that there are different endings in this story, and the influence on companions plays a role in battles. Nevertheless, I was stripped of the opportunity to go against the new god of death and destroy this cursed wall. Some hints of such a choice were present in the dialogues, but unfortunately this course of events was not implemented. Moreover, I can honestly say that some quests can be completed not in a very logical way. So from time to time I peeked at the GameSpot walkthrough to avoid getting stuck for hours in the same place. The story is largely captivating due to how epic it is. After all, we literally meet several gods and can communicate with them. Thanks to such dramaturgy and new music in the campaign, it creates an impression of the importance of us, our actions, and the rules of the universe in general. During our walkthrough, we will meet 2 of our previous companions, find out the fate of several others, and in one of the endings we will see Kelgar. Besides, in a dream we will visit Crossroad Keep. That is, the connection with the previous campaign is not that strong and well written. You can play even you haven't completed it, but the story of A Mask of the Betrayer is something extraordinary. It is difficult to put into words how truly interesting and skillfully it is made in terms of storytelling. If compared to other similar RPGs, this is top-notch linear story. It does not dissolve into other elements, additional quests whatsoever. There is a certain logical chain to which both main and other missions are attached, which creates one great story. So overall, what's the impression of the campaign? It's quite challenging. I would say both in terms of battles and the way certain quests are completed, it's overly complicated. But if you can suffer through the first few hours, the Mask of the Betrayer will completely captivate you. I've done this campaign twice, and although it wasn't easy, I'm still glad I gained this experience. Now let's move to the Storm of Zehir. This expansion was aimed to showcase the flexibility of Neverwinter Nights as well as the game's modularity, which allows for radically different concepts to be implemented. Moreover, the developers wanted to recreate a more traditional party-based RPG. One of the Obsidian's producers, Rob McGuinness, said the following: "The game was intended to be more authentic to pencil and paper Dungeons & Dragons by offering players a light-hearted approach to adventuring and a focus on exploration. In simpler words, the developers wanted to give players more freedom, which they did, although there were some nuances nuances that led to mixed reviews. So how does it place? All the improvements in terms of new races, classes and creatures were carried over from the Mask of the Betrayer, so we can play with them here as well. The main concept is that we now have a real global map similar to the old Fallout games, where we can roam as we please. Initially we can explore Samara, and then we'll move to Sword Coast with Neverwinter and Crossroad Keep.
Get your ass back here, boy!
Also, the focus has shifted towards a more sandbox gameplay, where we can create all 4 main characters or choose from those available in the base game, and later on we can acquire the leadership skill, which allows us to have a party of 6 heroes. The developers created a few more scripted companions, but they don't differ much from our own. The composition and skills of the party are extremely important. I would even say it's more crucial here than in Icewind Dale. For instance, now if a character falls unconscious, they won't get up after the battle, they need to be healed. If this isn't done, they die, and you have to spend special resurrection coins, spells, or run to the nearest temple for revival. This is crucial on the global map as well. Characters with high survival, perception and listening skills, druids, rangers for example, are better at spotting enemies and locations, making it easier to avoid unwanted battles. One of the main complaints about this expansion was the frequency of these random encounters. If there's an analogy, imagine these were like the roadblocks in the second Far Cry that kept respawning. However, by selecting and leveling up the appropriate class for these needs, you can limit the number of these encounters to a point where they won't annoy the player. Skills also have use in dialogues. In the original campaign, only the main character had to pass a check for a certain skill, but here all heroes can use specific responses. This concept will later be applied in games like Celeste, for example. Another new mechanic is trade. We can find useful resources, or for example, and sell them to cities for trade bars. We can also spend these bars to establish posts, upgrades, or exchange them for gold. As an additional mechanic, it can work well, but at a certain point in the campaign, we can't progress further in the story, so we're forced to wander the map and grind for at least a few hours. Overall, this is another significant drawback of the expansion. I've played Storm of Zehir before, and this time I wanted to see how quickly I can complete the storyline without farming. I added 1,000 trade bars to the console, so I would continue the quest, and later I literally added 2 levels for faster progression, so I wouldn't have to exterminate trolls for experience. With these tricks, I completed the campaign in just 3 to 4 hours. In other words, most of the forced gameplay time in Storm of Zehir is spent grinding. Yes, there are a couple of quests, but the majority of them, unlike the previous expansion, go there and bring these type of tasks. Another underwhelming aspect is limited loot, both in terms of items for characters and gold. If you're creating new heroes, it's always a struggle to equip even one, let alone 4. Most of the items will be found in the last locations, and although you can continue roaming the map afterward, there is little point in doing so. This is more about exporting to other adventures. Items need to be crafted and gold farmed through trading. Regarding the storyline, it's not all that great either. Not only it is unimportant as a whole, but it's also remarkably mediocre. I won't spare you from spoilers because there is little sense in it. Basically, our ship crashes on the shores of Samara, we get detained by the authorities, and we start working for the magnate Sasani, who suspects that everything didn't happen by chance. Then we spend several hours trying to uncover a conspiracy between 2 UNT clans. They want to take over the Sword Coast and reclaim their former glory. Zehir is their god who comes up with these plans.
Look at the top of his head!
We defeat the serpent, return to Sasani, and then decide whether to deal with her or let her be, as she's also a UNT. Not as evil, but not valuing anyone's life except her own. After all these events, we are repeatedly given the opportunity to either finish the campaign or continue wandering in the sandbox. What are the overall impressions of Storm of Zehir? A bit earlier, I said that for me personally, Mask of the Betrayer is one of the least liked among all of the official content for Neverwinter Nights 2. If we are being honest, the second expansion is worse than the first because it took a single concept for development and lost all the others along the way. Moreover, However, it may not appeal to players who love this game primarily for its story component. However, I'm not so critical about it. Yes, it looks empty. Yes, there is almost nothing to do. But the expansion itself isn't tedious. Want to create your own party and roam around having fun? Once you've completed the storyline, you can finish the campaign or keep playing. A sip of freedom after linear adventures at least adds some variety. So it's worth a try just for that reason. Now let's move on to the last campaign, Mysteries of Westgate. An important detail right away. It was developed by a different studio that mostly has done expansions, including for the Neverwinter series. Mysteries of Westgate could have been released right after Mask of the Betrayer, but it was constantly postponed, so it only saw the light of the day in 2009. At the time it was criticized for the absence of updates from the other two campaigns. Since Mysteries of Westgate was developed independently, we won't see Obsidian's implementations here. It plays almost the same as the main campaign. However, this doesn't mean there are no innovations here. In the expansion they added some new weapon models, icons, some creatures, and also fixed something that annoyed me in the original. Even empty unvoiced dialogues have a cinematic camera, like in more modern RPGs. If you've noticed, most dialogue lines in the official campaigns are unvoiced. It's understandable that this was done to reduce development costs. Nevertheless, when dialogues are written in a small window with tiny font, it's at least annoying. Here the majority of even silent interactions are crafted with the appropriate camera. The beginning itself feels like Morrowind. We wake up on a ship and don't understand what's happening. Overall, the expansion is made more like a role-playing game similar to the Elder Scrolls. Quite a few quests don't describe how to complete them, and you run around searching for solutions on your own. In terms of variety, Westgate's quests probably outshine all the previous campaigns. Fetch and bring quests are very rare here. The majority are wonderfully crafted adventures. There are some sort of detectives, an arena, a quest to make money. How to earn them is your problem. One time we fight the local snake beast, jokes about vampires and garlic. By the way, I noticed what inspired BioWare in Dragon Age 2. Sorry for the spoiler, but just like there, one of the companions here will escape and return in a very appropriate moment. What can I say? Everything new is well forgotten old. In fact, this applies to all Neverwinter's content. The game showed and introduced what RPGs still use to this day. This applies to both the story and certain mechanics. Sorry for the off-top, but what I mean is that the quests here are surprisingly interesting. The city as well. I would even say that in terms of detail, Westgate can outshine even the mighty Neverwinter itself. It's entertaining, diverse, both in environment and the creatures you can encounter here. In general, it's a perfect adventure for rogues because the main theme is the pursuit of a powerful local criminal gang. You can either do it as a good character or even join the bad guys. So you'll have to encounter pirates and all sorts of shady characters in this city rather frequently. While I'm not a big fan of gangster stories, here the atmosphere maintains a certain balance and is genuinely captivating. Also, I'll draw parallels with Dragon Age 2 again. Hawk's main problem is that quite a lot of quests happen in the same places. Locations quickly become tiresome, which is a significant drawback of the game. In Westgate, on the other hand, there might be fewer quests in terms of quantity, but the city doesn't get boring, and we constantly discover new places. So, in my opinion, this concept was executed somewhat better here. However, if the atmosphere and quests are great, the main storyline turns out to be not exactly bad, but not a cohesive story. The thing is, we came to the city because we found a cursed mask that gives us nightmares. Besides a few reminders throughout the game, it doesn't affect us in any way. No bonuses, no negative effects. Although I don't like the concept of hunger in Mask of the Betrayer, it's justified, forcing the player to keep moving. Here we're just running around like nothing's happening. The story itself progresses too slowly at first and then suddenly ends up in one moment. There is no tension, no climax, nothing. Also, it somehow ends rather forced. Again, it's not terribly bad, but its execution looks strange and scattered. In this expansion, it's the secondary quests and the atmosphere that are more interesting than the main storyline. Nonetheless, I still enjoyed the third expansion and had a positive experience. In my opinion, among all the expansions, The Mask of the Betrayer would be the best, followed by Westgate and lastly Storm of Zehir. Each brings something of its own, but a well-written linear adventure suits Neverwinter Nights the best. If someone wants even more content, there is Unofficial as well. For example, there is a mod that transforms Neverwinter Nights into the first Baldur's Gate. I played it a long time ago, so to provide feedback I need to play the first game and then take a look at the mod itself. You can also try dozens of fan-made modules, campaigns created using the game's own tools. They come in different shapes and forms, from utility stuff like arenas for leveling up and testing your characters to quality and interesting campaigns. Thanks to this, you can play Neverwinter Nights for literally hundreds of hours, if you wish. That's it for the content. Let's conclude. The second Neverwinter Nights is a historically significant game. It's the bridge between old-school party-based RPGs and the modern ones. Once I refreshed my memory about this game, I now understand that many ideas, both in terms of storytelling and gameplay, we've seen in many other titles. Obsidian created the way for other studios, and I'm immensely grateful for this. Ironically, even BioWare copied certain moments, although they created the first Neverwinter. The sequel still plays wonderfully even after all these years. The only point I want to admit, which I now understand, is that I prefer turn-based games over the ones with active pause. They have their own specific gameplay, nevertheless, this nuance in no way makes Neverwinter Nights a worse game. It's a gem that continues to shine to this day.